It's the stretch drive of the Montreal Canadiens season, and we are here for it. There he is Marco D'Amico from RG Media, rg.org, and MN D'Amico on all your favorite socials all season long right here on the Shaun Starr Show. Marco, welcome to the stretch run, brother. How's it going?
It's going well. How about you?
It's great. It's grand. It's wonderful. To quote the great Chris Farley from the great Billy Madison. Can we say the same, though? Great, grand, wonderful for what's going on with Ivan Demidov and Roman Rottenberg and the teeter-totter KHL season that is quickly, and it can't come to an end quick enough for Ivan Demidov's eventual arrival in Montreal. Let's start with the fact that this team trying to do something benches their leading scorer for what, and threatening him to send him to the MHL in Russia with Ivan Demidov. Marco, you've been all over this story for a long time, all season, really. What's the latest? Shine some light on Ivan Demidov and this disaster relationship with KHL hockey and Roman Rottenberg.
Yeah, it's mostly just with Roman Rottenberg, to be honest with you. I think the KHL very much appreciates him. I think SKA fans are also up in arms as to why they wouldn't dress their leading scorer in the playoffs. Now, I mean, the season is over. The playoffs have started in the KHL, or will be starting the KHL as of now. So we should see. He played on Saturday with Evgeni Kuznetsov coming back to the lineup. They decided to stick him on a line with Kuznetsov because Kuznetsov loves playing with Demidov. He said that to us directly. So I think it's a question of you have a lot of these veteran guys in the KHL that kind of see what are going on, and you don't want to lose the room either as a coach. And so clearly Rottenberg is playing games trying to get the Canadiens' attention so that they could try some backdoor deal to get the Canadiens to buy out Demidov's contract and get him to come early, right? And the fact that the Canadiens could be making the playoffs, they're in the playoff spot, in this conversation right now, it leads one to, to try and dangle the carrot in front of the Canadiens and say, like, hey, come and get your guy. But the Canadiens aren't interested in that. And if the Canadiens did have an appetite for it or did want to have a conversation about it, even though the rules state that they're not allowed to do it, I mean, there are back channel ways of doing things in Russia. So I believe that if that were the intent of the organization, it would already have happened. And money would have been distributed, and they're fine with, I understand fans. I do. You want to see it quickly. You're getting all caught up in the emotion of a playoff run. How cool would it be if you were there? How cool was it when Cole Caulfield left college and played 10 games with the Canadiens to end the season, and then was unfortunately benched the first couple of games in the playoffs, but Dominic Ducharme hockey, and makes his way to the lineup and is an immediate impact player for the Canadiens. Wouldn't it be cool if Demidov can do the same thing? Well, yes, but at the same time, Cole Caulfield Cole Caulfield was 20 years old. He was, Demidov, just turned 19. Cole Caulfield was a year older, a little bit more physically ready, played a North American game, had time to acclimate himself in the AHL and then kind of come in. I'm not saying Demidov isn't going to tear the house down when he eventually comes over, anything like that. But it's a tall ask to ask a player. Granted, he played an average of 13 minutes this season, but it's a tall ask to ask a guy to come in from Russia and then jump right into the playoffs against the team like, more likely than not, the Washington Capitals that the Canadiens would face if they do make the playoffs. Although that depends on what happens with Ottawa, because they're in a little bit of a funk themselves right now. So when you look at the logistics, I can completely understand why Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton would like to have Demidov as soon as possible, but are in no rush to make it happen. So I wouldn't, I just stress it to the fans, like, I wouldn't bank on that. I know a lot of people are like, they've seen reports online that all the Canadiens are trying. That is bogus, absolute bogus. Those reports came from an Elliot Friedman bit in his 32 Thoughts podcast, where a fan asked him whether or not they would see Ivan Demidov at training camp, and then his quote was taken out of context. Yeah, what he's saying is the Canadiens are actively trying to get him over for next season. And Kent Hughes did a really solid interview with Frank Saravalli at Daily Faceoff a couple days ago, where he echoed the same thing. And my sources in Russia and those around Demidov's camp confirmed the same thing. They just want to get to May 31st. At May 31st, Demidov's contract expires, and that's done. There's another aspect that has come up recently, and that was brought up by David Etigui, former player agent on BPM Sport on Gonzo and Josh Larac's show on the French side, where he kind of alluded to the notion that the Canadiens there would be no way where the Canadiens wouldn't have to pay to get Demidov out of Russia. And he alluded to the situation that happened with Ivan Fedotov with CSKA in Russia, which is the other big and storied franchise in the KHL, but understandable in the sense that that's the former Red Army team. And in Russia, there is mandatory military service. So in Fedotov's case, I'm not saying that this wasn't shady at all. It's absolutely shady. But they're the only team to do that, where if you don't play 2 years, the military service that you owe, that 1 year of military service that you owe, is if you play 2 years for SKA, they waive it. And Fedotov had only played 1 season, so that was like their loophole where they decided to keep him. SKA cannot afford to do that because a lot of their bread and butter is developing some of the best young hockey players in the KHL. You look at Matvei Michkov, you look at Ivan Demidov, the recruitment process basically lives and dies off of it, because right now you're seeing other clubs in the KHL get much better at developing younger players. Igor Larionov is coaching one of the younger rosters in the KHL, and he's got a lot of really good young players playing for him. Notably Canadiens prospect Bogdan Konushkov. So it's a different feel. And the SKA, albeit petty, isn't about to nuke their reputation.
No, but how do you go? You can't buy an oligarch. For the people that are like, oh, why don't the Canadiens go over there with a barrel of money? Like, we're talking
you
about
absolutely can buy an oligarch. I think we've seen that. And without getting into politics, I think it's very evident that you could buy an oligarch.
But I have heard that this one's a little different in the sense that he likes his player, wants his player, and the contract is the contract. And like you had alluded to, everyone's waiting for May 31st, so he arguably could be on the first plane destined for Trudeau Airport and land on the friendly shores of Montreal, Quebec, Canada.
Not immediately. There's a work visa, whole process that gets involved in that, and their contract needs to be filed with the league. Like, I wouldn't say like June 1st he would land in Montreal, but you know what I'm saying. Maybe he shows up for Def Camp. You know what I'm saying?
Let me throw this at you then. Like, a lot of people have been, when we talk about Ivan Demidov, and we can connect this to the 2C hole that everybody's waiting to see the team fill.
Mm-hmm.
People throw the name out and check the comment section of some of the content Marco and I did last week. Evgeni Malkin is on the tip of tongues of Montreal Canadian fans. 6.1 million, 1 year left to Pittsburgh Penguins. The angle being the Russian connection. A 19-year-old Russian kid coming to North America, trying to establish himself. Walk me through the strategy of, should the Canadiens explore options of his countrymen to make the transition easier and hopefully more productive?
No. I think the Canadiens are, first of all, you're going to be paying for the name and legacy of Evgeni Malkin if you try trading for him, first and foremost. Number two, Pittsburgh is not moving Malkin. They're keeping Crosby. They're keeping Malkin. My sources have said they're keeping Rust, and they're on the fence about Letang, but I'm pretty sure they'll hold on to him. Everybody else is basically fair game. So with that said, because I don't want the city of Pittsburgh coming for me if I say anything else, but when we talk about Malkin, I understand the need for a veteran player, but if the Canadiens are going to spend assets to go and get a player, they're going to get an age-appropriate center. Malkin is fine because I get it, he's Russian, and that's cool. Kirill Kaprizov did not need a Russian by his side to help him acclimate in Minnesota. To me, it's, you look at a guy like Matvei Michkov, for example, still needs a translator, and that's fine. It takes a while to learn language. English is complicating, but he still has a translator. Ivan Demidov already speaks English. The man is learning French for the love of God.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
this is a bright kid.
Yeah.
Very strong personality. And you look at that Canadiens roster, you look at the way that they treat each other, the way that they're all the family aspect of it, and the culture that this team is building. I don't think you need to go to the old tropes of having a countryman here to help get him acclimated. I think at the end of the day, like, the Canadiens are going to have a plan to bring him along, like they did with Slafkovsky, to the detriment of some fans, where he was playing on the
No
fourth line for
kidding.
a little too long, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think they'll have a plan for Demidov, and I don't think it'll necessarily be a problem. And from all intents and purposes that I've heard, the Canadiens are ready and have the resources ready for Ivan when he comes down. So I don't think that's gonna be a problem, and I wouldn't look to fill such an important role with the notion of short-term familiarity. It just doesn't seem like good business. Doesn't seem like something Kent Hughes would do. And I
No,
think
I
if
agree
you're
with that.
looking for a guy to fill a 2C slot when you have Nick Suzuki, to me, I'm not saying Nick Suzuki is a slow player by any chance. I think he's got above average speed once he's in motion. I'd say, maybe the immediate explosivity is where I would consider his skating not to be necessarily elite. I think they need a good elite skater as a number 2. My honest opinion, based on the styles that you've signed up, because you already have Jake Evans, who, granted, speed was never his forte, but he's, again, I would say above average at this point.
Yeah.
Owen Beck is an above average skater and if you can continue to add to his lower body, potentially an excellent skater at the NHL level. So we'll see where that happens. But I really do feel like they need, I'll shoot a name out there. I no information whatsoever, but just an example: a Chandler Stevenson style, or Matt Beniers style of skater, an Anton Lundell style of skater.
Dude,
Those kinds of guys.
I did my live show Saturday morning, 9:30 every Saturday on YouTube.com. Matty Beniers.
That might have been my
I go
fault.
check the video. I don't know how many comments popped up.
Yeah,
We had over 200 people watching this
bad.
live Saturday morning. Matty Beniers, brother. I mean, this is the
Well, it
sexy
makes
name
sense.
here.
It makes sense simply because he's having less than ideal season, and like we talked about in a previous episode of this podcast, like it is an organization that has a rare excess of potential top 6 centers, and the Canadiens obviously have a excess of futures that they could potentially offer a team that seems to be keen to acquire some of these futures. So that kind of idea makes sense. But to me, if you're going to get a player, you're going to get a player that is like mid to late 20s into like the beginning of his 30s, and I think that's the key, right? And if you go and get an elite skating center, chances are that player will not necessarily have a sharp decline into their early 30s. And I think that's the key.
Let me ask you this question.
Let
me ask you this question. Pop quiz, hot shot.
Uh-oh.
Is Ivan Demidov on the Montreal Canadiens March 22nd in the year 2026? Yes or no?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Just pop quiz. That's it. You passed 100%. You got 100% on the test.
Yeah. I think I understand that a lot of us in the media, will have to report and write on what we see or comment on a lot of this stuff that is happening. But I do, like, all of this is hot air. All of this is hot air. Matvei Michkov could, like people were saying it in some of the local print media here, that Matvei Michkov may never come to North America. Oops, came a year later. Matt or David Reinbacher is going to play NHL games before Matvei Michkov ever crosses the board. What? That argument died too. Like this idea that Russia is going to hold back their top young players. Again, as we said, outside of CSKA, CSKA, so where Alexander Romanov used to play, for those that remember, and Kirill Kaprizov. Outside of that organization, the military thing is not, like, they're not good. So I wouldn't worry about that. I wouldn't worry about it at all. The only thing I would tell fans is all good things are worth waiting for. Just be patient. The Canadiens organization is confident that he'll get there. He will get there. I think now the question is simply, where does he fit, and what are the Canadiens going to do in order to fill out the rest of their roster? Because you are basically acquiring a top 6 winger the moment he's on the ice. So,
amen. Can't wait.
You have a bunch of guys that are doing well in certain roles. You have a clear need to fill, but I think at that point, once filled, it will put every single player in the Canadiens organization, give or take a couple of guys, in the right seat. And I think that's where you might see more balance from an offensive perspective.
Marco D'Amico, always a treat. Just the best stuff as always. Follow him online at MN D'Amico. Marco, thanks. And we'll catch up again next week for another exciting week of Habs content. Let's see where this roller coaster ride takes us. Marco, thank you, brother.
Always a pleasure, guys.